All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Super Bowl number 57 is officially in the books, and it lived up to the billing. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles were clearly the two best teams in the National Football League this season, and it was only fitting that they met in the final game of the season for the Vince Lombardi Trophy. Now, the Eagles set the tone in this one early as they took the opening kickoff and marched right down the field on the opening drive for a touchdown. Kansas City would then respond with a touchdown drive of their own that was culminated when quarterback Patrick Mahomes connected with his security blanket and tight end Travis Kelsey for a touchdown and knocked the score at 7 apiece. Now, from there on, there were several game-changing moments in this one, in my opinion. You go back to midway through the second quarter, Philadelphia is up 14-7. They had already stopped Kansas City. They were driving again, and the fumble by quarterback Jalen Hurts, which was picked up by Chiefs linebacker Nick Bolton, who returned it for a touchdown to knot it at 14 apiece. If you go back to the play before that, it was a third and short scenario for the Eagles, which turned into a 3rd and 6 after a false start. And, it was one of those where you kind of knew that the quarterback sneak was coming. That was one time it did not work for the Eagles. And, it's one of those what ifs, obviously, but it was a big what if because it changed the momentum of that game because Philadelphia looked like they were driving to possibly get at least 3 more points. So that at the very least, it's a 10-point swing right there. And now you're up as far as dominating the game in time of possession and yardage, but you're still tied with Kansas City. Then, going later into the second quarter, the Mahomes ankle injury. Philadelphia was up 21-14. They were putting some pressure on Mahomes. He got tackled on the bad ankle, limped off the field. And right there, if that's the middle of the game, Philadelphia probably would have had more of an opportunity, in my opinion, to try to tee off on Mahomes. But of course, it was just before the half. Mahomes had additional time, obviously because of the additional halftime for the Super Bowl to try to get some, more functionality in that ankle. And this Chiefs offense and Patrick Mahomes looked much better in the second half after that. Speaking of that, Philadelphia was able to stop Kansas City. They took a timeout, got the ball back, but being unable to get a touchdown and having to settle for a field goal, they were still up 24-14 going into the break, but it's one of those where 28-14 would have sounded a lot better. And I say that because obviously Patrick Mahomes is a guy that if you keep it close, more than likely he is going to burn you. And that is what happened in the second half of this game, that Philadelphia did get burned by Patrick Mahomes and this offense. But for me, one of the biggest things as far as the game changing moments, the adjustments by Andy Reid at halftime, because you look at it, and of course, we expected Philadelphia to run the football. They had 115 yards, but 70 of those came from quarterback Jalen Hurts. But it was Kansas City's ability to run the football as they had 158 yards on the ground. And if you go back and look at that first drive to start the second half, that was a tone setter. Kansas City, for the most part, ran the football. You know that you have a wounded Patrick Mahomes, and what do? A quarterback's best friend is a running game. And from that point, it made the score 24-21. And I know that Philadelphia was still leading, but if you're Kansas City, you had to feel a lot better about yourself. Their defense came out and played better in the second half. They held the Eagles to a field goal on their first drive to make it 27-21. And okay, fine, we're going to get an opportunity to go down there and score a touchdown and possibly take the lead, which did happen. And these right here are game changers, but they're also tone setters. And I think it was tremendous by Kansas City coming out and making those adjustments and finding a way to get after Jalen Hurts a little bit more and try to disrupt some of the timing on this Philadelphia offense, which Kansas City was able to do just enough about. Now, of course, a lot of people are going to be talking about it, and rightfully so. The controversial holding call against Philadelphia towards the end of this contest. It was a third down scenario for the Chiefs. They were stopped, but the referees called a holding penalty on Eagles cornerback James Bradbury on Chiefs wide receiver Juju Smith Schuster. It's one of those where we know that the Super Bowl is typically the referees let them play. And in this contest, Kansas City had three penalties, Philadelphia had six. It was a penalty, but it was borderline, to say the least. Now, I will say this, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here. Earlier on in this game, in the first half, there was a clear pass interference call on Juju Smith Schuster that would have given the Chiefs a first down. That was not called. Was this a bit of a makeup call? I don't know. But it's unfortunate that that call right there, that late in the game, is going to mar what was a very good football game. At the end of the day, you got to let them play. And if it's not completely egregious, you know what? You let it, you just let it rock. At that point, again, it was a penalty, but it was borderline. And I'm not sure. Obviously, it was holding, it wasn't pass interference. So, I don't know if Smith Schuster was going to catch that ball, but nonetheless, it was a very close call. And obviously, it changed the game because you figure Kansas City was going to have to go for a field goal. If they made it, they're up 38-35. But now you're talking about Philadelphia getting the ball back with about a minute and 40 seconds to go and one timeout. And they would have had the ability to possibly tie the game and even win the game. We don't know, but nonetheless, it's one of those where unfortunately that call is going to mar what was a very good football game. Now, speaking of that, and I'm talking about the Eagles defense, where, oh, where was their pass rush? Because at this point, you might as well put their D line on a milk carton because this Philadelphia pass rush, 78 sacks on the season coming into this game. 70 during the regular season, eight during their two playoff games. And I talked about this being a factor leading up to this game as far as their ability to rush the passer. For the most part, they didn't really breathe on Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes was not sacked at all. And then, of course, we saw that big run that Mahomes had late in this contest to put them into field goal range for the game winner. But nonetheless, if you're Philadelphia, your defense didn't make enough plays. And more importantly, this defense did not make enough adjustments. This team did not make enough adjustments on Kansas City. Kansas City made the adjustments, and that was a difference in this game. I said coming into this game, Kansas City had the better quarterback and head coach, but Philadelphia had the better team. And in those clutch scenarios, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes were able to rise to the top, if you will, and that was a big difference in this game. But nonetheless, the fact that the Eagles were unable to heat up Patrick Mahomes with that pressure that was their bread and butter all season long, that was a deciding factor in this contest, or was called, pardon me, on James Bradbury late in this contest. Now, you look at it, and offensively, the Eagles played well enough to win. But again, it was their defense that they were unable to make the plays. And that is a big head scratcher because defensively, Philly was the fresher team. Because you look at it, Kansas City's defense was on the field for the majority of the first half in this contest. And, I expected at some point, if that trend continued, that probably going towards the fourth quarter, Kansas City's defense might have been, running out of gas. But with Andy Reid being able to switch up his strategy in the third quarter and going to more of a running game, it shortened this contest because Philly hardly had the ball in the second half. And plus, in extending those drives, in running the football, you shorten the game, but also it was another way to keep his defense fresh. And again, you go back to that first drive of the second half when KC scored that touchdown, especially in the fashion that they did, it just created a spark for this team. Isaiah Pacheco ran very hard in this game, and that was a big difference in this game. The Chiefs' offensive line versus the Philadelphia defensive line in this one. And, it's one of those, unfortunately for the Eagles. Jalen Hurts would have been the MVP if they had won this contest. Aside from the turnover that resulted in a touchdown, he was 27 of 38 passing for 304 yards with a passing touchdown, as well as 70 yards on the ground to go along with three TDs. And I give Jalen Hurts a lot of credit. He has become a better thrower of the football than he was once upon a time, and he has improved. And I think that he is going to continue to improve. But make no mistake about it, if you're Philadelphia, obviously disappointment in the way that this game ended, but nonetheless, you do have your quarterback of the future in Jalen Hurts. He showed tremendous poise in this contest. I love the way that he bounced back after that fumble that led to the touchdown for KC, brought his team right back down the field and scored a touchdown on the ground as well. So, nonetheless, this young man has tremendous poise, and I think he will be able to bounce back from this. He played a tremendous game, but just, nonetheless, it just was not good enough. And on the flip side, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they did it again. You're talking about now one of the better quarterback head coach combos of all time, because it's one of those where you win one title and that's one thing. But once you start to get into that connection where you're winning multiple Super Bowl championships, it takes you to another level. And that's big, because you think about it, the Super Bowl has now been around for 57 years. And I'm not even going to go back to the old times of the NFL pre Super Bowl. Obviously, there's plenty to talk about there. Some of the historic teams with the New York Giants and Cleveland Browns and Chicago Bears. We could just be talking all night about that. But nonetheless, just from the Super Bowl era, not a lot of quarterbacks have won multiple championships. Not a lot of head coaches have won multiple championships. Not a lot of organizations as a whole have won multiple championships. Kansas City now has three, of course, two with Mahomes and Reed, but nonetheless, they have now taken a next step. And, Patrick Mahomes, he wasn't healthy today. He wasn't 100% out there, gutted it out. And again, he found a way, and he did it with his legs in the second half. Mahomes was the MVP and threw for less than 200 yards in this game, but his completion percentage was high. He was 21 of 27, but nonetheless, he willed his team to win, and that's what it's all about. That's what it comes down to being a leader. Sometimes you're not going to be at your healthiest, you're not going to be at your best, but you have to will your team to win. Mahomes did it in the AFC Championship game when Kansas City knocked off the Cincinnati Bengals. And of course, he did it once again this evening. For Nick Sirianni, this was a tough one because, you looked at him, he had his team well prepared. The Eagles were the best team in the NFC all along throughout this season. They were one of the better teams in the NFL. And for me, I think the biggest thing for Nick Sirianni, he just didn't make enough adjustments defensively in this contest. And that is part of the reason why Philadelphia is on the wrong side of this coin, if you will, as far as this championship game right here. And of course, for the Kansas City Chiefs, to the victors go the spoils. They've got their second Super Bowl championship in the last 4 years. It was also their third Super Bowl appearance in the last 4 years as well. And then, of course, when you win, the question is going to be, do you have enough in your arsenal to run it back? And I think I'm not going to say no and I'm not going to say yes, but I will say this. Kansas City will be right back in the mix. And because you look at it, this was supposed to be somewhat of a rebuilding year for the Chiefs. They were a lot younger defensively, especially in their secondary. You trade a guy like Tyreek Hill to the Miami Dolphins, and that was your speedster. That was your over the top guy. And yet, and still, you're right back in the same spot. Remember, Kansas City began the year at this field when they dominated the Arizona Cardinals in week number one, and they finish the season in Glendale as well. So you're looking at it, you still got Andy Reid, he's 64 years of age. He looks like he's not slowing down as a head coach. And then, of course, you got Patrick Mahomes in his prime. So I think Kansas City is going to be right back in the mix. Of course, the AFC is still tough. Obviously, we got a lot to shuffle as far as free agency and trades in the draft. I'm going to be talking about that more in depth during the week. But nonetheless, if you're Kansas City, you got to like where you are. You got a Hall of Fame head coach in Andy Reid. Right now, it's one of those where Patrick Mahomes is in that rare era. I know he's 27, but this kid is already, in my opinion, done enough to be a Hall of Fame quarterback, and he's throwing to a Hall of Fame tight end in Travis Kelsey. On the flip side, for the Philadelphia Eagles, it's one of those where they're not going away either, but it's a scenario where it's not a guarantee that they're going to get back. And I say that because the Eagles have tremendous depth on this team on both sides of the ball. Did not show up defensively in this one, but nonetheless, you look at the talent at wide receiver with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Obviously, pretty soon they're going to have to give Jalen Hurts his extension because he is still on his rookie deal. They probably you might have some retirements coming up soon on this offensive line, which has been one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. So these are questions that you're going to have to think about if you're the Eagles. But as good as things were for the Eagles this season, they're still picking very early in the draft. They're going to be picking 10th overall in April due to the fact that they made that trade with the New Orleans Saints. So now they have the Saints' first round pick as well as their own. So that's a good opportunity for Philadelphia to really go out there and keep this machinery flowing. Now, on the flip side, even though you got to the Super Bowl, and you didn't win if you're Philly, basically everybody that you face next year is going to be gunning for you. The NFC East, obviously, this season showed a lot of improvement. You got three teams to the playoffs, and the Giants, Cowboys, and of course, Philadelphia. The Washington Commanders showed improvement this year, and they look like they were on the verge of making the postseason as well. So, those things you got to factor in because all of those teams are going to be gunning for you. And if you're Philly, you lost three games in the regular season. Two of those came within your division. You lost to Dallas, and you lost to Washington. So, nonetheless, it's one of those where I think Philadelphia is going to be in the mix, but it's never easy to go back, whether you're the winner of the Super Bowl or the loser of the Super Bowl, because again, even though you got there and lost, everybody that you face is still gunning for you because you are a litmus test based off of what you did last season. But at the end of the day, there is only one team that can claim that they're kings of the mountain for the NFL season. And obviously, it's like that in every single sport. But nonetheless, just bringing it back to the National Football League, the kings of the mountain for this season are the Kansas City Chiefs. It's one of those where if you look at it, the game wasn't pretty from their standpoint. It wasn't flashy. But you know what? At the end of the day, you're not trying to go out there and win on style points. You're just trying to go out there and win, period. And that's what Kansas City did. They found a way to get it done. And that is why they are now in possession of the Vince Lombardi Trophy, the second one for this group of Kansas City Chiefs. And of course, the third in their franchise history. But nonetheless, the Vince Lombardi Trophy will be headed back to Kansas City. And I'm sure those folks out there are going to have a nice celebration this week. And they're probably going to be celebrating from now until throughout the summer until, we kick it off for the 2023 NFL season. But nonetheless, a tremendous game, controversial finish. But at the end of the day, the trophy is in possession of the Chiefs. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.